I said it.
No, louder. Your people were talking.
Welcome to the podcast club.
Gorgeous. All right, thank you, Gabe.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the UCC Podcast Club. We got our first episode of the 2021-22 season, and we're starting it off by talking about the start to school. Just like we did last year, we're going to run through what's going on in the first months of school, what to expect during winter break, and we're going to be celebrating our new member, William, joining us today because the rest of us are grade 12s. But give a round of applause for William, guys. All right, Albert, why don't you start us off here?
Yeah, I guess just to start off, it has been a while since we've all convened here at the podcast club. Given that it is grade 12, I know that a lot of us here are quite busy with exams and applications and all that sort of shazam. But I guess just to start off, do you guys have any thoughts about how the year has started, how you're feeling, and what you can expect in the future?
When will it end?
It's a very interesting point, Jaden. Would you like to elaborate on that?
I don't know, man. Every day it's dark. Like
the voices are saying something.
It's tough, man.
I think we should get Francesco's perspective. It
I think
seemed
we
that
should
he
get
would
Francesco's
quite
perspective.
resonate with the statement by Jay.
I haven't felt happiness since about 2018. I miss being held by other humans and feeling a genuine connection to them.
Homie, Fran, you've been at school for 2 months now.
Gabe's singing in the background. That's what's kind of driving this mood forward.
Okay. That's
I mean,
always good to know.
personally, I feel like I kind of started off the year, I guess, expecting that it would be busy, but I would have like no idea how it would actually feel until I actually started kind of going through it. Like I knew there'd be a lot of stuff to do, including exams, including uni apps and all that shazam. Keep using that word. But I feel that generally, I mean, it's November now, and I felt like September and October passed really quickly just because so many things were going on at once. And, you know, like I was juggling a lot of different stuff and I couldn't really have time to focus on the actual passing of days and things like that. There was always something else to do. And I think what I'm, I guess, expecting is just I'm holding on until I guess near the end of December at least, or at the start of winter break. And I think that'll be a good time where I can find some downtime and really look back on the past 3 or 4 months and all the work that's been done there.
Albert, you sound so professional. I think
Yeah.
the worst part about this is that we have terrible study habits from COVID. Like my classroom habits during the online period was like abysmal. I don't think I've paid attention in a single. Okay, I won't say which class, but you know, I think we've all experienced this. There were certain classes which we just did not have like any focus upon, and it's kind of weird having to focus at school during those classes again.
Yeah, there are just some courses that they just don't work online. They're very like concept heavy and very cumulative, and I think everyone knows which like subset of courses I'm talking about. But yeah, I think specifically for those courses especially, just like online learning kind of ruined my study habits as well. Like I find it really, really hard to focus and work for extended periods of time, which is a little bit of a concern because we're on like a 4-day break, the point of which is to study as much as we can. So I really need to snap out of it, I feel.
Well, I don't know if anyone else has felt this, but I was going through my phone's camera roll the other day, like my really old phone's camera roll from the pandemic, and I found screenshots of our schedule from last year. Like, how did we manage with 30 minutes in a class, like for a day? And now, like, we have to deal with 3 times that.
Remember, like, I don't mean to interrupt really, but remember like end of 2020, so like when we were in grade 10, like when it was only
That was grade
day.
11, Steve.
No, I'm talking about when the pandemic started.
Oh, you mean like June?
No, like in like March of 2020 when things really started getting intense. That was when we were just finishing grade 10, as in the year 12s. So Glasser, you were not in year 10 at the time, but we were, so I'll just talk about that from our perspective. Just like back then, like we had half a day's worth of classes, and just like, and grade 11, obviously there was more work and they were trying to ease back into things, but it was still a lot less intense. And now we're jumping from that into the most intense year of our like high school. So yeah, it's not really ideal in my opinion.
Also, the year 11 exams were probably like the lowest average that any UCC, like in the history of UCC. I've heard so many stories of people getting like abysmal marks that you would never expect anyone to get from the year 11 exam. So I don't think we're sufficiently prepared for our upcoming exams at all.
You like that word, Jay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Wait,
think
which one? Sufficiently?
abysmal.
Abysmal, yes.
Abysmal,
Um,
yeah.
But I
I-
think that the big thing for me was test taking was a big hit. Like I know there was probably a year and a half period where I was only taking tests online, which was a different kind of test taking when there's no one like directly looking at you besides through a screen when you can't even see them, versus now test taking is a lot more different. Like you have someone always looking at you. You feel like you're in a completely different space than you normally are. And like the like test taking is just a bit different, which I think is hard for like trying to succeed, which is why I think it took a big hit for our exams.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think last year and the year before, the learning environment was so different. And I think like at least the latter half of year 10 and the entirety of year 11 should be really preparatory for like the stuff that we're supposed to experience in year 12. But it was just so different from what we're doing now that it almost feels like we've been thrown into the fire and kind of like have to fend for ourselves. Because it's just, there's so much that's kind of new to us. Like just even with exams that are coming up, I heard like from one of my classmates, you guys know him, Trey. He's never taken like a school official exam before, other than those last year, which were no hurt, right? And so to be approaching exams this year, literally next week, it's really weird for him because like he feels that there's a lot of obviously pressure put onto the exam and stress put onto the exam, but he hasn't had that experience before. And even with us, with the entirety of last year being put online and coming this year with like literally the most important, I guess, educational year of our lives, and being expected to really kind of have a gist for what we're doing, it's a really strange position I find myself in.
I mean, the exams don't even really make sense because you still have your normal assessments after the exams, and these exams aren't even for the IB. They're like to prepare you for IB exams. So it's like one or the other, right? If you're gonna have exams that don't have your normal assessments and vice versa, it just doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm. You know, I actually wanted to get William's opinion on all of this because as a year 9, you know, he doesn't have, I guess, the year 12 exams that we're going to have coming up soon. But similarly, he has been learning online and in a different environment than he is now. So I guess what do you kind of feel about your shift back to in-person learning and all that?
I've found that the expectations of a lot of other students has been expecting like the same amount of work as they've gotten over the last, I guess, year and a half. So maybe that's a thing just being a couple years younger. But I think getting back to a full workload has hit a few people harder. And because of that, I think there have been more distractions in classes and things. Meanwhile, when we only have 4 classes at a time, I find that I have little to no homework depending on the cycle.
What do you think about like your development over the past like year and a half or 2 years? Because I know that in grades 7 to 9, I had exams every single year and I had tons of tests and stuff, but like missing out on that, do you think like there's some sort of like lack of preparedness going into your years of high school, or do you think that that isn't really a problem?
I think it's a little bit of both, just depending on what kinds of things you've done. If you have taken tests and if you have been honest on those tests and held the integrity of those tests, then I think you're probably prepared. But that's not the case for I'd say probably about half of students just in general that, don't really care about it. They just want the good grade and are willing to cheat on the test. And I think that is a major setback if you have just been, cheating your way through it to this point where now, okay, that's a bit harder in person.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a very serious accusation, Will. But I do agree. There's definitely some very sus averages last year that probably shouldn't have been. So I yeah.
I think
Well,
part of it
but
also.
don't
Yeah, go ahead,
yeah,
William.
don't attribute that all to people cheating though, because yes, some of it definitely is, because that is, one of probably the top three biggest downsides of having online school. But I think a lot of it is also just that, again, I'm new to UCC, so maybe it was different. Maybe the standards were just as high online, but at the school I went to last year and the year before, the expectations were much lowered online. So I think that also can be attributed to part of those maybe fluke grades.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to talk about as well. I think especially last year with exams, even though they were no hurt, as Jaden mentioned, some of the grades that people got were abysmal. But the eventual conversion to OSSD was actually very, very generous. Like it wasn't even following the UCC mark scheme or mark bands conversions. And I think just in general over the last year, yes, it was certainly a little bit more difficult to learn, but I also think teachers considered that and they were a little bit more generous with their grades. I don't know what you guys think about that.
I think I'll just jump in as well, because I feel like we've been talking a lot about like the downsides, and we sound very like doom and gloom in our discussion. And I mean, that's fair because the situation does suck. And I'm personally of the opinion that the class of 2022 is the class that's going to suffer the hardest from all of this. But I don't know, personally, I'd say that overall I've enjoyed this year so far. I've had, of course, the school's been very hard. There is a lot of stress about marks and getting them sent off to university. But personally, I've had a lot of fun this year, just pursuing my hobbies and stuff. I think this might be just unique to me, but I think that this has been so far I've had a great time this year, and I think I might be in the minority here, but I don't think that everything is all just like, I don't think everything's entirely bad. You have to look at the silver lining as well.
Yeah, so let's take that as a segue, because marks are they're very doom and gloom, as you pointed out.
Yeah.
I think it's better to talk about the pros that we have this year, like something that we didn't have last year. I mean, clubs still aren't in person, but they're close enough to that because you're in the same vicinity as some people. Sports, those are in person. Year 12s were actually able to watch a hockey game a couple weekends ago, which was crazy, out of the ordinary. So what are some of the biggest things that have come back this year that you really missed last year?
Well, I think one of the big ones was we got assemblies back, and that's a huge deal because obviously assemblies have been a huge part of UCC's tradition for hundreds of years at this point, literally. And so I'm just really happy that we got to have a real Halloween assembly, that we got to see the senior jazz guys perform. We got to have our like costume competition. We had that that short film that I thought was really funny. It's been we've gotten assemblies back, which I think is quite important.
And not
Yeah,
just
and I
that, but
think,
also,
yeah, go ahead.
but also for me, especially as a new student, being that earlier, I think it was this week, we had a year 9 and 10 assembly in Laidlaw Hall. And, when they announced, okay, this is how the volleyball teams have done, this is how the football team did, and hearing everyone cheer together in class, it was really a feeling of everyone, rooting for the same things and being excited that I probably haven't felt, especially in a school setting, in a long time.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. And I think just in general, just like a return to in-person activities, like we're definitely not back to full capacity. Like the gyms still aren't open to like just general student use yet. But like even the small stuff like intramural sports, house sports, like just having those available and getting houses back together and being able to experience, as William said, like the bond that we have as UCC students or as houses, right? Just having those in-person experiences have been really refreshing, especially after an entire year of online learning.
Yeah, I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here, and I hope you don't mind. But being in the position of head of house this year, it's kind of been not the best in some ways. Most like students are great, the activities are great, but the only downside is the participation right now.
Right.
Like I've created numerous posts. I've like the house meetings, probably half of them have been from announcements and getting people to sign up for Movember, World Partnership Walk, that sort of stuff. But like we defaulted like more than half the times for house soccer. And like that's, I mean, I don't really see that as a fluke because the house soccer is really hard to get people out to, but especially this year. But the house system, even though it's back, it's not one of those things that's like fully back in swing, kind of like assemblies, because assemblies only have 2 grades. It's not really full back in swing, like everyone gets to sing Moses and bang the pews again. Like it's not that much hoist anymore. Like no one really knows a lot of the younger students don't know the traditions. And a lot of the board of stewards talked, and we kind of point our fingers all in like simultaneously in one direction. We point that to not having locker rooms. Like locker rooms, William, you probably don't really know this very well, but locker rooms back when COVID wasn't a thing in like 2019, like beginning of 2020, it's the only area in their school where teachers aren't really allowed. So students get to bond a lot more than they would in class or during recess. That's where a lot of these traditions and assemblies really came to be. So with those gone, but I mean, the student life really took a blow there this year. But the good thing is that talking about getting locker rooms back for grade levels, I think in the new year, that has been a conversation with the board of stewards and like the parent organization. So, I mean, if that happens, that's going to be like a huge step forward because grade 8s, they already have their lockers upstairs now. So like, I can only imagine what it's going to be like when everything's back in that way.
All right, it's time for my one contribution to this entire call. I think kind of what Nicholas said, like those discussions with the board of stewards, I feel really bad for all the stewards because they've inherited like the worst possible time to be in charge. Like, I think it was like Mr. Pascalidis' Friendship Assembly we were talking, which was, by the way, a masterpiece of modern literature. There were questions for I think it was the year reps, and they were like just really getting skewered on some stuff. Like people were asking them stuff about like, when are we going to get our locker rooms back? What are we going to do for like social events? Are we going to get mask-free days? And so like they're just kind of forced to deal with all of that, and they can't really come out and say like, yeah, we have no idea what's going on. So yeah, I feel like they've gotten really unlucky with that.
I mean, I definitely agree with the impact of locker rooms. David Park, the previous head of house for Oars, was elected based off of his permanent tenure in the locker room. Like this guy would like basically never leave. I think he slept in there at night. Like it was crazy. But also just one positive impact about coming back is the teachers. I think for me, I really want to have like a good relationship with my teachers. And I think I learned best by asking a lot of questions in class. And it's very hard to do that when you're just like, typing it up and half the teachers don't even notice it. So I think that's definitely like a really great thing about it. But yeah.
Some teachers were better at online school than others. I think is pretty
100%
evident, but like some of them just didn't adjust well, which is fine. Obviously, they all have different ways of doing things. Some of which are so they all had different classes that had different like teaching requirements and stuff. But yeah, some online learning was a bit of a game of roulette with regards to like how it was going to go.
And like what's a little crazy is I came from a public school. I don't know where you came from, William, but I came from a public school in grade 5, and I still talk to the people that go to like Etobicoke Collegiate Institute, Etobicoke School of the Arts. And I'm like friends with some of my old teachers, and some of my teachers, they don't stick with like one course. One of my like one of those teachers, and like actually a handful of them, have to teach math, English, history, and coding, all to 5 different classes. And the TDSB, I think, told them like a couple weeks before school started, like they we like should be like incredibly thankful for like the stuff that we have now. Granted, things aren't perfect, but like it's really important to keep the other perspectives in play, because that's just like insane what public schools have exams, and like we're over here talking about why we shouldn't have exams. Yet public schools have been having them like for the whole pandemic. Like it's just something to keep in mind when talking about this stuff.
Yeah, totally. Even last year when we had no herd exams, their exams counted. So our situation is still, I think, a lot more plausible than it would have been if we were in public school. So we should be thankful for that. But I definitely agree with what some other people had said about just the environment of being back in person and having better relationships with teachers. I think just in general, the learning environment has improved a lot for me. Being able to interact with classmates and teachers, being like more comfortable asking questions and like interacting and like actually working on team-based projects or solving problems together. That has been a huge boost to the learning environment for me. And that applies to all sorts of different classes, some classes more than others. I would say for English, at least particularly my course, it was very discussion based. And so online, it was really difficult to run that because everyone had their cameras off and you were basically just assigned reading. And when you came to class, sometimes the classes would be really short, but some people would just not talk. And it was difficult to get a sense for the assignments that we would have, which a lot of the time were based on like, discuss this piece of text, right? And now that we're back in person, having those discussions really helps, I think, in terms of my performance in these types of courses.
Also, like a lot of the way that I learned previously was community based. So like I would get help from my peers, and my peers would like get help from me, and we would like talk about assignments. And when you don't have that connection with your peers anymore, I feel like the averages would drop because you just don't share information as much, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I think though is with coming back to school, like the diversification and like how much you can like spread your wings has really increased. Like I know before during the pandemic, everything was like within a centralized bubble. So I know like during exam time last year, I think I probably left the premises of my house, like my house in my backyard, probably not for like 2 months because I could exercise in the basement. I could do my clubs on my computer. I can work at my desk. I can get food from my kitchen, which like you could do a bunch of different things, but everything was kind of confined to one place and it wasn't as connected versus now, like you go to a field to do your sports and then you go to school for your clubs and then you can go out of school for other things. So I think like just even having a different environment for all of your different things really helped.
Yeah, I think have like doing everything in your house also is pretty bad like mental health wise. I think that there needs to be like a feeling of like meaning to when you do activities, right? And when everything is confined to your computer, everything feels the same, and that can contribute to like maybe not boredom, but definitely you don't feel like what you're doing is significant.
Apathy.
Yeah, kind of yeah, apathetic, yeah. And I remember that I was kind of losing track of the days. Like I would never know what days like which, and I wouldn't really care either because it really didn't matter. Everything was on my computer, right?
Yeah, I agree. I just think that just generally just having a change in scenery every so often is very important. That's why just recently actually on the weekends when I've been wanting to get work done on the weekends, I just go to my grandparents' house and just do work there because it's less distracting. It's a change of scenery because I don't know if I had to work at the same place every day for months on end, I would just kind of go insane. And so I just kind of like I just try to try to keep things fresh, I suppose. I think it's really helpful. I agree with Jaden.
Yeah, just a question for you guys. Last year, I was slipping into this mindset that things felt really optional. Like things that like were like 100% like you have to go to, like class. Like class, like in grade 10, none of us were skipping classes, right?
No.
But like during the pandemic, like you're in your room, you're on your laptop, and like you have YouTube open on one tab and then your class is open in another. And it's like a 50-50 decision mentally, like what you want to do. Now, I luckily never fell into that mind trap, but that had affected me so much that like in class now, my brain is like, it can't really comprehend focusing on the one topic for over like an hour. Like after like an hour in class, I already start thinking about like what I'm going to be doing in like the next 5, 10, like 20 minutes, what I'm going to be doing when I get home. Like it's nonstop. Like I can't, because it's going from 30 minutes, like I said, 30 minutes to an hour and a half, it's a lot. But changing the scenery is different, and having such an abrupt change, especially in grade 12, it's just like adapting is like near impossible.
Yeah, I think because I just generally struggle with staying focused for long periods of time. Even before COVID, that was an issue for me. And just over the course of like this past year and a half, or I don't know, maybe yeah, over this like past year and a half, it's become it's become a bit of a challenge to like really, well, for me at least, and I imagine for a lot of people, it's become a bit of a challenge to like really buckle down and do things and like.
Now, I mean, I hate to keep jumping in here, but I think this is a really good question to ask. During the pandemic, we're all talking about like how we're going insane and like rotting away in our rooms. But like, what were some of the things that you guys did to stay like mentally sane?
um I've been talking too much. Someone else go.
Copious amounts of guitar. Guitar and running. And I think the podcast club actually helped quite a bit because like
Yeah. Oh, that's
it
true.
It was very infrequent, but it was nice that like, you know, every month, 2 months, a year, we could all get together and like, you know, play Jackbox and just kind of like be idiots for a little while and just like feel some sense of connectivity, which was nice because, you know, up until then, like you can barely, like the most you can interact with someone is like basically on Discord.
And yeah, and plus to jump in again, because I have not learned my lesson about talking too much. Like last year, it was so strictly cohorted. Like it is to an extent this year as well, but not nearly as enforced as last year. So because of that, like you got the group you had and you were just with them for the whole year, which obviously there's not a problem with that per se. Like I was with Francesco the whole time, and obviously he's a good friend of mine, so I really enjoyed that. But at the same time, like if there were like people you wanted to talk to, it would be very difficult to like actually see them in person because of how strictly cohorted the school was, and just because of how paranoid and strict just the world was in general at the time.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. At my old school last year, I was in a cohort all year. There were 10 other kids, I think. I was like good friends with maybe 2 or 3 of them. But by the end of the school year, when you're in person, online, doing everything with those same people, I was sick of almost every one of those people.
Yeah, just a question for you. Like, I know at our school, we had a cohort policy where it was half and half. So half of the kids were in person one day, half of them were at school the other. And I know that the cohorts didn't change for us at all throughout the whole school year. So I hadn't seen some kids for like a year and a half in person, which is pretty crazy. But I don't know what at your old school what the policy was, and whether there was like some sort of change in dynamic when you returned of like talking to old friends for the first time in a year and a half or something like that.
Yeah, so sort of 2 things with that. First, in grade 8, there were different restrictions from the Ontario government. So we were in person 5 days a week, all day up until January. Then January to mid-February, we were completely online, and then back in person until like the beginning of April, and then online the rest of the way. So we were never split like that, half in, half out. But I was also new to that school last year. So I didn't really have the whole talking to old friends in person for the first time in a while. But just definitely, I mean, you could see it with other kids. Like, I think everyone, whether they admit it or not, like, you like to be in person to see the other people. And for the people that do say, okay, I prefer online because I roll out of bed 5 minutes before class and log on to my computer, like, realistically, I just don't think that's the case. All humans want to see and interact with other humans. So to whatever extent, even if you're an introvert. So ultimately, I think that in person is best.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. Because in like some cases, I mean, with the cohorting, because it was half and half, and then even if your friend that you really want to see was in the other cohort, you wouldn't be able to see them the entire year. So yeah, that was unfortunate. I think from year 10 to year 12, that was the first time I saw Nicola after like 2 years. So that was pretty interesting.
That was a very emotional time.
Nice.
I funny enough, my friendship with Matt is a little bit different than the rest of you guys, because everyone here I really like talked to before the pandemic, but Matt and I didn't really start talking until like June or something like that. Or it was like June and like when we saw each other, it was like, wait, this is like my first time like seeing this guy. Like, I don't know if anyone else had like that surreal moment of like you grew with someone like a lot over the pandemic, like could be like relationship wise or could be friendship wise, and then like you see them again and they've changed a lot, or it's like your first time seeing them in person and you don't really know how to react.
Yeah, I grew like a foot, which is very nice for me.
It's kind of with Joey too. I hadn't seen Joey for like almost 2 years, and like now, like all of a sudden, like we're going to the SAS together. Like it's kind of like a thing now. He's grown a lot too. Like I barely recognized him. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, some people drifted apart, some people came together, but I think I don't really think I experienced that. I think most of the guys I spent a fair amount of time talking to before COVID started, I continued to talk to throughout COVID, and now I didn't really experience that myself, but I do know some other people did.
Yeah, like I'm online for a year and suddenly I come back and Nicola has the body of Dwayne The Rock Johnson. Like,
I'm pretty sure Nicola had that body before COVID.
Nah, I think Nicola just evolved.
No,
Really?
we didn't. No, Jay, I took a little bit of a before and after picture. I've changed quite a bit.
Okay. Well, I remember you had like an 8-pack in grade 10 cross country or something like that. So
why are we
I
talking
think
about
we
this?
have a good topic for the rest of our podcast.
Let's talk about it for the rest of the
podcast. Too much.
I guess on that note, just as a final thing to kind of close off this episode, is there anything that you guys are like looking forward to that you expect to change over the course of the year, that you think you're going to be able to do something or see something afterwards that you think would be really exciting that you can't do as of yet?
Battle of the Bands.
True. And the talent show. The talent show and
the talent show, yeah.
Secondary, Battle of the Bands.
You want to know, actually, something is happening. Something that something is probably happening is that the senior jazz band, who 1, 2, 3, I think like 3 of us here are in senior jazz, and senior jazz is going to be going to Montreal in January, hopefully. And that'll be great because that'll have been the first like band trip since for us at least, since like a while ago, and it would be great to get back into doing those sorts of things again.
Yeah, no, Steve, I don't know if you remember this. Joey, you too. Remember back in April last year, like February, before the pandemic started, we had a Chicago trip scheduled.
We did. Oh
April.
yeah, no, I was in charge of the band at that time. Sorry, this is a bit of a tangent. I was in charge of the band. Me and Gomes were hashing out the details of our Chicago trip. We were getting like the room pairings and stuff together. And I think, yeah, no, we were supposed to go in.
No, it was April. I remember the date.
Yeah.
It was April 11th, and I was so like,
Yeah, I was so excited.
sad.
Yeah, because
Oh.
like the thing is, our grade, we're all in the same grade. We went to Washington grade 8. That was really fun. We didn't do anything grade 9. We were supposed to have band trips in both grades 10 and 11, and then they both got canceled because of COVID. So we kind of missed out in that regard. But at least we'll get to do this. So that's for something at least.
So I think we'll end the episode off there. Thank you everyone for listening. It might be a while before we record our next podcast, but it was nice seeing everyone today. And catch you all later in the next episode.